I'll just give everybody 1 minute to get joined, and then we start. Cool. Welcome all to to Nordic Sustainability's first webinar this fall. The webinar will be about sustainability at the core of business model and strategy. Sustainability has long been a priority for many companies, but has often been decoupled from companies' core strategy and business model. Companies' initiatives have often been reactive, driven by regulation, or trying to keep up with competitors, rather than treating sustainability as a matter of value creation and business model viability. In this webinar, we'd like to explore why sustainability should be a core part of the business model strategy and how this can be achieved. My name is Parathan, and I'm a senior consultant working in the strategy practice of Nordic Sustainability. I'll be a moderator of today, and my role is to make sure of two things: to make my utmost to make sure that all of your questions get answered, and importantly, that we keep the time. We hope that you will leave this webinar with concrete examples and inspiration on how to embed sustainability into the very core of your company. As you may have seen, today's agenda and speakers are the following. First, we have our very own Felix Bärmann, a manager at Nordic Sustainability. He'll be speaking about bringing sustainability at the core of business model and strategy, and why it is important to do so. Felix has supported large privates within sustainability strategy and draws from his experience in the sustainability departments of Vestas, Volkswagen, and Flying Tiger Copenhagen. He has a background in philosophy, economics, and business from CBS. Secondly, we have Lisa Ekstrand, talking on the subject of sustainability in everything we do. Lisa is a vice president of sustainability at Vestas with over 14 years of experience. Since 2019, she's leading Vestas' sustainability department and with responsibility to drive the company's sustainability strategy, also called Sustainability in Everything We Do. In 2022, Vestas was named the most sustainable company in the world by Corporate Knights. Prior to this, she was working at the European Parliament, advising on environment, climate change, and health policy. She has a background in political science from Lund University. Finally, we have Caroline Reid, speaking on the topic of a company built on the idea of change. Caroline is a sustainability director for the EMEA region at Oatly with over 15 years of experience from working with sustainability at IKEA. She has a background in product design engineering from University of Strathclyde and Nanyang Technological University, Singapore. Before our first speaker, we have some practicalities to cover. We very much value to actively engage our audience in our webinars, so please remember to share your questions in the Q&A tab, and also remember to upvote any question you find relevant. We'll be sharing a recording of this webinar on the YouTube channel, and the materials also will be shared by email. Thanks again for joining this webinar, and now it's time for our first speaker, Felix.
Thanks a lot, Parathan, and hi everyone, and welcome also from my side. As an introduction, I will be talking, as Parathan already alluded to, about sustainability at the core of the business model and strategy. I'll be giving a bit of context. Why is it that we're talking about it now? I'll be talking about the why, why are we talking about this at all, and the benefits of integrating sustainability at the core of the business. Then we're really curious to hear more from Lisa and Caroline, and as to how they are working to integrate sustainability in the core of their businesses. At Nordic Sustainability, we believe that tomorrow's leaders transform today. We at Nordic Sustainability have a long-standing focus on a baseline and strategy development based on the best available science, because we believe that everything else is simply not facing or cutting it for the challenges we're facing. We are a Copenhagen-based consultancy focused on sustainability exclusively, and we're supporting our large private sector clients to enact the urgently needed change. We help our customers understand where they are today with baselines, co-create ambitious strategies, and figure out where they want to go in the future, and then enable them to take these big leaps via implementation support and capacity building. In doing so, we strive to champion a different consultancy model based on expertise, integrity, and ambition. At the very core of what we do is that we are deeply convinced that the existing sustainability strategies that are based on incremental change only are set to fail in the future. We really think that the science is really clear on this one. It's simply not enough to address the poly crisis we're battling right now by focusing on incremental progress. We need to have a long-term approach rooted in science wherever that's possible, and thus providing the companies with a vision and sense of direction on where they need to go. This transformative approach is really at the core of what everything we do at Nordic Sustainability. To understand the role of business models in this transformation, we first have to realize the journey ahead. We believe that it is very much possible and actually even absolutely crucial to define what we're working towards to begin with. A sustainable company for us at Nordic Sustainability is one where all harm on people and planet is eliminated and positive contributions to people and planet are amplified. Today, and that's not a surprise to any one of you, no company is there yet. Even sustainability leaders are lagging behind what's actually needed, but regulation such as the CSRD and ESRS are about to lift the field as such. And this is really what we're seeing, that the new wave of regulation, which is coming as we speak, is mirroring this kind of a long-term transformative thinking. The ESRS, the European Sustainability Reporting Standards, are a great example of that. The standards require companies to disclose across 10 topical standards, here portrayed on the left, spanning the E, S, and G dimensions. At the start, companies are required to determine whether these sustainability topics are material at all, and if so, disclose a full variety of data points in their sustainability reporting. However, the standards also require disclosure around 3 other aspects, which are more interesting from a strategic point of view. First, companies are required to disclose how their commercial strategy and business models actually link to the sustainability topics. They are secondly required to disclose targets and KPIs if applicable, and thirdly, also implementation plans and how far along they've come in implementing these. And of course, and that's rightfully so, the journey starts with materiality and data, but generally it can't end there. The first important steps are to figure out which topics are material and then to disclose the data. But the important point is that it almost generates no value. So neither for people and planet, so what's often called the impact materiality, but also from the financial materiality point of view, there is very limited value generated by simply disclosing a lot of data. Companies might get a bit of a better ESG rating, but of course, we all know this falls short of the change we need to see. So while this is a very good and important starting point, this is where companies right now acquire a lot of sunk costs. They have to do it, but it, generally speaking, doesn't generate a lot of value. And this is why leaders have long understood, and Oatly and Vestas, of course, very much in that bucket, that to work with sustainability strategically, more is needed. Sustainability leaders have long started setting targets and following through on their implementation plans to meet these targets. Specifically, if these plans are designed to feature absolute impact reduction targets that are in line with the best available science where possible, and stakeholders can transparently understand where the company is on its path to achieving these, there's a lot of value generated both for the company and for its stakeholders. And this is also what we're seeing right now. We see targets and investments break new ground. Sustainability has made it, to the top of the strategic agenda. We're seeing a full wave of companies signing up to initiatives like the Science Based Target Initiative, now covering more than 1/3 of the global market cap. And also the investments increase year on year with regards to sustainability. So up to this point, all shiny and rosy, right? This is where we're coming in and want to be a bit of a party pooper, because while these lofty targets are very admirable, they are set to fail if addressed as an afterthought to commercial strategy and business model. To illustrate this argument, we've created a very simplified and schematic visual below. It focuses on climate, but could just as well be any other negative sustainability impact. We have a linear revenue growth in the black line, 5% year on year, and greenhouse gas emissions in the orange bar. Right now, we are experiencing what we will potentially be remembering as the easy phase of decarbonization. Decarbonization initiatives achieve a big bang for the buck. You have quick progress because you have proven solutions at a cost-effective status, so that progress can be achieved very, very quickly. However, midterm, this trend will slow down as the returns on investment for decarbonization projects decrease. Only incremental gains become achievable. However, of course, commercial growth would ideally proceed to grow as usual, meaning that some of the hard-to-abate emission sources, such as emissions from the value chain, are scaling with the commercial success. Over the long run, the continued growth really drives up emission sources, particularly these emissions from material consumptions, which are inextricably linked to land use change and overexploitation of our planet's resources as the company grows. At the same time, decarbonization becomes very, very costly, so that there are actually commercial constraints as to limiting further emission growth. As a result, decarbonization really is set to fail if addressed as an afterthought to business models, if addressed with the mindset of simply cleaning up after the core business model. And this is, of course, already with a huge simplification that we just assume that business could go on with business as usual. And of course, we all know that given the status of the climate crisis, the condition of the planet, and with that also the conditions to do business, will worsen significantly. We all know business can't continue the trajectory it's on right now. So at the core of the problem really here is that sustainability isn't usually linked to business models and commercial strategy. There's an interesting study from BCG that says that only 1 in 15 strategic initiatives focused on sustainability are actually also generating strategic value for the company. With that, the largest lever for change is simply ignored. It is about what you do that primarily determines your consequences, and how you do it is second in line. And this is what we also see with the spirit of the regulation like ESRS, that it becomes very important to make that link. The benefits of making that link and integrating sustainability into the core business model and commercial strategy, we believe, are manifold. Firstly, it is, of course, about the more traditional benefits, such as cost efficiency and uncovering new revenue streams. And of course, particularly with the second option, both Vestas and Oatly are great examples. But also, more broadly, it is about creating stakeholder value from stakeholders, from the employees to investors to communities, to many, many other actors. A more holistic approach to sustainability integrated into the core business model is value generating on many different fronts. And finally, and this is, I think, at the focal point of this webinar, with moving sustainability to the core of the company, you are putting yourself into the driver's seat of a value chain transition that is bound to come anyway, given our shape of our, for example, the climate crisis, but also the biodiversity crisis. So the overall environmental challenges we're facing. But given that this change is about to come anyway, it is about modeling it and modeling your value chain and your relationship to your suppliers and customers so that it regenerates commercial value for you. And at this point, I'm going to hand over first to Lisa from Vestas and then to Caroline from Oatly to learn more about how they are doing it in their respective companies.
Thank you very much, Felix. Are my slides coming up here, or shall I bring them up?
You should bring them up.
That works all good? Good. Great to see. All right. Thank you so much for the very kind invitation today. I'm here to talk about how we are currently integrating sustainability in everything we do. A little bit about how we got started and the journey that we are on right now. So let me just change the slide. So first of all, I mean, I'm super lucky to work for a company that are delivering some really great products. We are making wind turbines. We have done so for more than 4 decades. And of course, wind turbines and wind energy and renewables as such is of course a key established solution to fight the climate crisis. Just to give an example of what we actually contribute with. So only in 22, if we look at the wind turbines that we produced and shipped in that year, they are expected to avoid more than 400 million tons of CO2 over their lifetime. That's a big number, perhaps difficult to relate to, but that is more or less equivalent of 88 million passenger vehicles driven for 1 year. So, of course, we have a big impact related to our core business by delivering and making even more efficient wind turbines that deliver more kilowatt hours that are lasting for longer. We have a great impact. However, back in 2018, 2019, we could really started to see that making wind turbines is having, of course, a great impact, but we also need to do more. We could really see an increasing expectation from all our stakeholders involving customers, investors, employees, that there's also a large expectation on us to really look into sustainability in a more holistic way. So basically integrating sustainability into the full value chain. Because although the products that we produce and ship every year avoids a lot of CO2, we of course also have our own CO2 footprint. We also generate waste, and that is something that we really want to move away from, and is also very much expected from our stakeholders. Just to give an example, our customer base, which is the big utilities of the world, they are also now, when they're bidding into new big auction schemes, they are also expected to demonstrate on so-called non-price criteria, which is often very sustainability related. So the decision made back in 2019 was to really start integrating sustainability holistically throughout the company. So and that includes from how we're running our own operations, but also within our supply chain. So that's a little bit how we kind of went from sustainability is the business we are into sustainability in everything we do. And I will, of course, explain this in more detail. The strategy that we launched back in 2020 is based on 4 pillars. I will focus on the first 2 ones here because we only have limited time. So I will focus on the environmental ones. So we have one commitment to be carbon neutral by 2030 without using carbon offsets. And that is basically the emissions from our scope 1 and 2 emissions. So the emissions that we control ourselves, you can say in a simplified way. On top of that, we also have a commitment to reduce emissions in our supply chain by 45% per megawatt hour delivered to the market by 2030. And some people ask about, so why 45%? Why not more? I should say that when we look at our total carbon footprint, 99% of our emissions comes from scope 3. We are using a lot of raw materials, many that are very CO2 intensive, such as steel. Steel is also, at least what has been historically called a hard-to-abate sector. So there is some it's not there's definitely some big challenges to address to really get the CO2 reductions down from our supply chain, but we are very much committed to drive that, and I will speak a little bit on how we have engaged with our suppliers on that. That said, even though the big majority of our emissions comes from scope 3, so our supply chain, that does not mean at all that becoming carbon neutral in our own operations by 2030 will be a walk in the park. We have some areas in our own operations, such as fuels that we use for those vessels that we use to service offshore wind turbines, that are emitting quite a lot of CO2. And even though technology is ramping up there, it is of course a very big investment to be made. So we are steaming full ahead on both commitments, and there will be a lot more to come in the next couple of years. On zero waste, that is something that is in particularly important for us. We have a wind turbine that is to a large extent recyclable. There is a lot of steel used in the wind turbine towers, which from a CO2 point of view is not so good, but from a waste point of view, better so, because it's of course easy to recycle, and steel has a high value. But we want to make sure that the entire wind turbine is recyclable. And today the challenge is with the wind turbine blades. They are made out of composite materials that are difficult, or has been until now difficult to recycle, because they are very difficult to separate when they reach the end of life. So it's they have been designed to last for a very long time under harsh conditions, and that is what we're now trying to solve. But I will come to that as well. But zero waste is not only about making sure that the entire wind turbine is recyclable. It's also about eliminating waste from our own factories, but also setting specific waste reduction targets for our supply chain. So a little bit on the approach that we have taken to sustainability at Vestas, because when we went up to the board back in 2020 to get this to get the strategy approved, it was also a very clear message from our board that we need to make this very, very concrete and tangible, because they were all very clear that they want to see very also tangible results also in the short term, and we needed to find a way where we could basically work on this in a structured way. So we have been working on a number of so-called priority projects over the last couple of years. Projects that were chosen based on impact, so impact towards delivery, towards our CO2 reduction and waste targets, but also of course where we see where we can provide value to our customers. So what can we focus on to make sure that has a significant value when from a customer perspective? So when they look at their assets, the wind farms that they buy from us, they can see a significant reduction in CO2 as well as waste. So with a very detailed mapping of the emissions in our scope 1 and 2 own operations, and scope 3 supply chain, it was we could easily identify what hotspots we have in order to deliver on our targets, and that then guided the priority projects that we have been running since 2020 and are still working on, and with a few more that is not seen here on this slide. The way that we have organized ourselves around this is really with the mindset that sustainability cannot be driven from cannot be fully driven from a headquarter function alone in isolation. This needs to be fully integrated into the business. So for all of these different projects, we have set aside cross-functional teams representing different parts of the organization and different competences, working together in addressing these different challenges that we have, and with good success so far. And now I will deep dive a little bit into the different projects that we're running. Here I will first talk a little bit about the commercial facing products that we have been developing that also have a very big impact on delivering towards our commitments. First is of course on blade recycling. This is something where there is high demand from our customer base. They want to make sure that the wind turbines they buy from us, when they reach their end of life after 20 or 30 years, they can be fully recycled. This is something that I've been in the industry for 14 years, and the topic of finding a solution to recycle wind turbine blades have been a topic since I joined, and most likely even before that. And it's always been considered more or less impossible because of the reasons that I mentioned before. The wind turbine blades are made out of composite materials, and they and if you cut up a blade, you will find different layers of materials, carbon fiber, wood, and so on. And they have been put together with an epoxy resin, so that is a glue. And they're not supposed to be separated because they are really supposed to last in places where there is a lot of wind. And that was exactly what we had to find a way to solve. How do we actually find a way to separate materials that have been designed from the start not to be separated? And I will speak a little bit about the actual solution we have found just in a minute. We have also what we realized from the start, also based on the graph that I showed before, and that was that steel is something that we really had to focus on. Steel is basically the entire wind turbine tower is made out of steel, and as you know, conventional steel is very CO2 intensive. So we knew that this was something that we had to find solutions to. I remember very well when we started to engage with our steel suppliers back in 2020. And we were more or less told that what you're asking for is impossible, at least not in the time frame that you're asking for. Many of the steel makers' decarbonization plans were running to 2040 or to even 2050, so way out in the future. But we didn't really settle with that, and of course we were also helped by, at the same time, there was a lot of kind of growing interest for so-called green steel. Although many of the green steel products that you see out there or being talked about today is primarily for the car industry. But now, when we are in 23, we have actually found a way forward with some of our steel suppliers on a steel product that we called low emission steel. It's not a fully decarbonized steel, but it is a steel product with a CO2 intensity that is 60% lower than conventional steel. So still a big leap forward. And of course, while we are now able to offer that, we are working with the suppliers to also try to accelerate the availability of fully decarbonized steel, hopefully already by 26, 27. On our service fleet, so that is definitely another large challenge for us, because of course also as we see the market for offshore wind turbines growing, we will need to use a lot more vessels that service offshore wind turbines. We had a very similar conversation with the vessel suppliers that we had with the steel makers. That in the first kind of dialogues, it was all the challenges that were kind of put forward. But now, again, 3 years later, we have so far last year we tested a hybrid vessel to see how that works in operation. And now this year we will be testing a vessel that will be fully powered by methanol, so 100% methanol. So this is a bit of testing new technology to see how it works in operation. With the hope and expectation that we can scale up later. A little bit about also how we work with reducing emissions in our own operations. Of course, we generate quite some emissions from our factories, in particularly our blade factories. And that is because the heating systems that we use, they have traditionally been heated up, the factories by gas, and that we are now moving away from. often to electric heating, or in some cases biomass boilers. And those are quite large investments, but we are taking one factory at a time, and so far we're done with 2, and we have another 2 up for replacement in 24. Collaboration with other partners is something that we have also experienced as very important, because we cannot find all the solutions ourselves. It does require collaborations with our own supply chain, but also with companies outside our own value chain. So when it comes to servicing our onshore wind turbines, so the wind turbines at land, we use a lot of vehicles to drive up to the wind turbines to service them. That might not sound like a big issue, but we have roughly 5,000 service vehicles in the company around the world. That adds up to a lot of fuels and thereby also a lot of emissions. And it's currently today it's roughly 1/3 of our emissions in our own operations. So we're still in the early days. We have a couple of hundred electric vehicles now in place in our service vehicle fleet. But we have decided to work very closely with Volkswagen in Europe, but also Ford in the US, that at least for now have a good fit with the cars that they're putting out on the market, with the needs that we have. Because it's not really a typical electrical vehicle that you need. You need to have vans that can carry heavy loads. We have a lot of equipment in our service vehicles, and sometimes they also need to drive quite long distances. So that's how we're tackling that.
Thank you, Lisa. The time is unfortunately up, and we have to Caroline. Thank you, Lisa.
And I am muted. Typical. Okay, hi everyone. My name is Caroline Reid, as you heard, and I work with sustainability at Oatly. I put Oatly on the screen just in case you otherwise hear Oakley. We're not the sunglasses company, it is the oat milk company. So I'm going to tell you a story about the plant-based revolution and how sustainability and business go hand in hand here at Oatly. Let's go. So we are a company with a mission to exist to make it easy for people to eat better and live healthier lives without recklessly taxing the planet's resources in the process. So at Oatly, our core business and sustainability are one and the same story. And so what is good for business is also good for the planet. And not many companies can claim that, although I guess Vestas also can. So we are a company where we want to become a once-in-a-generation company that leads a global movement to reduce cow's milk by half. We want to replace as much cow-based dairy as possible with Oatly, reducing the climate impact of dairy. Reducing the climate impact of a dairy. Let's go back a tiny bit and just do a bit of science. Many of you probably on the call are sustainability professionals. Some of you might be in the food industry. I recently joined the food industry when I joined Oatly, and I think it's just always amazing to start with like, what are the facts actually around climate and food before we then go back to Oatly. So just briefly, 1/3 of all greenhouse gas emissions are actually come from the food system. We need to eat, so okay, we should have some emissions from the food sector. But 1/3, really? Half of those come from the animal-based sector. Now, for you meat lovers out there, you're probably thinking, but that's probably okay, because probably half of what we consume and the calories we get on our planet are from meat and dairy. Wrong. Let's look at a little bit more science. So on our planet, 77% of all agricultural land is dedicated to the meat and dairy industries, whether that's livestock actually being farming livestock or farming feed for livestock, with only 23% of land for crops for direct human consumption. But when it comes to the calories, and that's why we eat, we need energy, only 18% of the calories come from meat and dairy, with 82% actually coming from plant-based foods. Protein's always the argument why we need to keep eating meat and dairy. So let's go squash another myth and tell you that only 37% of the protein supply globally comes from meat and dairy, with 63% of protein actually coming from plant-based foods today. So hopefully you're understanding that our food system is a little bit broken today, huge amount of emissions, huge land use, and actually the foods we're eating, they're not even meeting our nutritional needs. As people, we eat for nutrition, but the way we are eating today is driving non-communicable diseases. No, I can't say this word. Non-communicable diseases like malnutrition in some parts of the world, but also obesity, heart and vascular diseases, and diabetes in other parts of the world. So the food systems are stretching they're stretching our natural resources without meeting the nutritional needs of us as people. We urgently need to transform the systems, and we need to switch to a more plant-based diet. And that is what science says. Coming back to Oatly then, why do we have then this vision that we want to have the impact from cow's milk can have? Well, we want to do it by switching people to consuming Oatly. And what you can see here is an LCA specifically for the Swedish market. We recently last year published together with Blanc very in-depth LCA comparing cow's milk in our key markets to our products. And what you can see is that here in Sweden, if some of you were in Sweden, Oatly products vary between 50% to 70% less impact than cow's milk. And so that's why we say when it's good for business, it's good for sustainability, because as we grow, we actually drive this impact as people move away from cow's milk. And that's then the positive impact we have from getting people to switch from cow's milk to Oatly. But of course, it's interesting looking at our footprint as well. And so this actually compares our footprint in Sweden again to the footprint of comparable cow's milk in Sweden. Because our emissions, of course, we do have climate reduction goals per litre for our product and for production for our supply chain. But what you can also see here is that, yes, the biggest part of our emissions comes from farm. It's actually from oat cultivation. But what you can see also from a cow's perspective, it's huge amounts of emissions from the feed they eat, and also, of course, from the farts and the burps that cause a lot of methane. Production in Sweden, we're running on renewable energies in our factories, so you can see that's low. Packaging, similar. Transport, similar. Of course, we have targets to have more sustainable packaging, more sustainable ground transportation. Storage is very similar. So overall, just to highlight that we do also work on reducing our footprint, but by simply having people switch away, we're having this positive impact through avoided emissions. So replacing as much cow-based dairy as possible with Oatly, reducing the climate impact of dairy. Therefore, we've started to measure our avoided emissions, which we call our handprint. And we saw a minute ago from Lisa the Vestas avoided emissions, probably been done for quite some years, I'm guessing. But for us, it's all quite new, and we're quite proud of it. So there are 3 levers that drive the handprint. And why I'm sharing this is, one, just because it's good for you. Maybe it's interesting to understand how a company goes about reflecting on how to measure the handprint. For us, it's about the number of litres we sell. That's 1 litre. That's 1 lever. The second lever is about how many people have made the switch from cow's milk to Oatly, because it's not all the litres we sell. We are obviously, some people come to Oatly because they're consuming another oat milk and then find Oatly and like, wow, this is so much better. So that doesn't count. It's the people coming from cow's milk. And then the third is the difference between our footprint and cow's milk. And that's why it's really important that we also have the ambition to reduce our own footprint over time, which actually makes then our handprint even more impactful. But one thing I want to also highlight by showing this slide is that it's about engaging. You had it also, Lisa, you mentioned sustainability is about, oh no, maybe it was you, Felix. Sustainability is all about engaging stakeholders. And what's really important is actually recruiting talent and keeping talent inside companies. And what's really amazing for a company like Oatly that's purpose-led, that's able to have such a positive impact, is that all people in our company have the possibility to influence our sustainability impact. Commercial teams sell more, great. Take it away from cow's milk. The innovation teams, we make better products. More people are willing to switch away from cow's milk. And then, of course, more traditionally, through the supply chain, It's about having the actions to reduce our footprint. And so really everyone in Oatly can really stand behind sustainability and be involved in it, which makes them very engaged and satisfied. Just a bit of maths. I'm not going to go into the equation, but just to say that we built out this methodology of calculating our avoided emissions together with Qantas. So it is proposal Qantas, and it is in line with the World Business Council for Sustainable Development guidance around measuring avoided emissions, because of course there are now set ways of doing this. And so in 2022, it was the first time we reported on our avoided emissions, our handprint, and cumulatively over the last years, we have now reached, it's not quite the same as Vestas, but we're a much newer company, but we have contributed to 471,000 1,000 tons of avoided CO2 emissions, which is, putting it in another context, the same as someone flying 1.3 million times between Copenhagen and New York. So it is still something. And this also is a really, I find, speaking internally to my colleagues and co-workers here at Oatly, it really makes people motivated to understand that, like, when you actually can quantify this positive impact you're having as a company. But then, and then also maybe I should also say, by starting to also publish our handprint, we also really hope that and talking about it, we hope that other companies will start to reflect on their footprint versus handprint. Do they have a handprint? Can they quantify it? But if not, how can they actually start to change their business model? How can they adjust their business model, their products, their services to actually contribute to avoided emissions, rather than focusing only, but importantly, on reducing the footprint of the business? But being a purpose-led company can also have challenges when it comes to wonderful sustainability frameworks and guidelines and so on. So I just want to also highlight a sort of, it's not a major challenge, but something that we're also obviously aware of at Oatly. Things like being SBTi aligned, or getting a great score in something like CDP. All of these are built up that you should have absolute emission reductions for climate. And of course, that's what we need for our planet. But for us, our focus, even though it's on reducing the intensity climate footprint of our products, we don't foresee our absolute emissions reducing, but we see them continuing to grow, because as they grow, we contribute to the positive avoided emissions of bringing people from cow's milk to Oatly. So what we actually want to do is we want to grow, and we want other and the positive impact is actually from the helping out the dairy industry and reducing their footprint and their absolute emissions. So sometimes it can be a little bit challenging how frameworks are built up for the incumbent big companies today. I have only 2 minutes, and I just wanted to finish with a little bit of like some visuals and inspirations, because one is about how we actually, the impact we have, but one is how do we actually drive and disrupt this industry and drive the change and have people think about making the switch and empowering a plant-based revolution. So all starts with great products. Great tasting products is why people might want to make the shift. We as a brand, we're seen, we're vocal, we're out there. We empower, strange, it's missing, but we've empowered through knowledge since 2019. We've put our product carbon footprint on pack. This is, I see your 1 minute. This is to show that we are being transparent, of course, but more than that, we are also advocating that we have mandatory climate labeling on pack throughout the world, so people are able to really compare product to product and understand the impact of what they are consuming. We also are challenging the industry to be better. So here's a great ads we had recently where we offered free billboards for the dairy industry to also show us their footprint and their impact on the world. And maybe that would make them think about how they can reduce it even more. We also dare to speak up on the issues that matter to us, such as squashing ridiculous legislation or getting plant-based milks into things like the school milk scheme, so kids can actually have a choice. And we stay true to who we are, because by doing all this, by being a leader, by disrupting, we sometimes make people pissed off. And so we have created the website oatly.com, where you can go on and see all the mistakes we've made and then celebrate them. But also it's where we learn and celebrate, and just highlight everything that we have we do right, and maybe sometimes people think that we do wrong. And I think that's us on time. So thanks everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to both Felix Lisa and Caroline, and thank you, Caroline, for making the sped up version of your the last part of the presentation. I'll just quickly do so we can actually see everybody here. I think that works now. So you can see side by side. Thanks to the audience as well, so posting a lot of questions. We have a lot of questions to you, Lisa, especially. But just to get us started here, to both of you, what advice would you give to other companies looking to bring sustainability to the core of the business model? And let's start out with you, Lisa.
Yeah, I just had to unmute. One like the key advice. Yeah. Oh, there are so many. I think I think being bold and ambitious. I think I mean, we of course there was a significant analysis done before we launched our strategy in terms of understanding, you know, what are the hotspots. So it was not that we were kind of throwing ourselves into the unknowns. We knew, you know, what we had to focus on, and we knew that it was going to be difficult. But if we knew every single step, every single euro that we had to invest before, no, we did not. And I think, and if we had done so, I don't think that would have been valid anymore, because things are also moving so fast. I mean, as I mentioned, you know, we've seen the steel industry moving faster than what we expected. So being bold and ambitious, of course, do the homework, but don't wait until you have every single detail in place, because that will take you 10 years before you get going. And we need to get going now.
Exactly. And Caroline, what about you?
I agree with everything Lisa said, and I just think I think also what should be really considering is what within your company's portfolio offers, services, products is actually contributing to a better sustainable future, and work out how to really refocus business models on that part of your company, and work out really how to phase out parts of your company in terms of products and services that are not contributing to that today. And I think the sooner to do that, the better. And I think the other point is, of course, this is nothing that one company often can do alone. So it's about finding like-minded partners and stakeholders in this journey ahead.
Yeah,
so, yeah,
those are great points. I also feel like what both Oatly and Vestas share in this is kind of creating a market push for more ambition across the board. Really, I remember when you, Lisa, launched the strategy a couple of years back, there was a lot of movement in the entire industry. There were a lot of competitors trying to catch up. Suppliers were really interested in what that meant for their relationship with Vestas and how they can take a part in it. And then kind of you keep reiterating that, both, of course, from, you know, challenging the incumbent industry, so the energy industry, the big oil majors for Vestas, but of course the dairy industry from Oatly's perspective. So that really creates a push and a momentum for all actors to integrate it to the core of the business model.
Yeah, as you also mentioned, Lisa, earlier, it's very important to handle the challenges along the value chain, and engaging the whole value chain and all the stakeholders in it. And relating to that, there's a specific question to you, Lisa, here is, what have been the biggest challenges to overcome to pursue your sustainability strategy?
The biggest, it's difficult to say the biggest challenge. If I should take one, no, but of course, I mean, it is, I mean, of course, you know, there are daily challenges with, you know, finding the right partners, you know, inside your own value chain and outside and so on. But no, but the biggest challenge is, I mean, it is a change process. I mean, of course, we have been, as I introduced my presentation with, we've been in the sustainable business for many years, but I mean, but still the journey that we have been on now since 1920 is really about, you know, making sure that we look at sustainability as a value lever compared to some of the traditional ones, you know, cost, quality, safety, and so on, and to really get that integrated in all different areas of the business. And I mean, we have been successful to a great extent in some parts of the organizations, but in others we still have more work to be done. So to kind of get, you know, the whole kind of a big organization like Vestas takes time. Again, I mean, we are now 3 years down the line, and we're not fully there. So we will get there. We're taking it step by step, but that is definitely one of the bigger challenges to implement that big of a change that it actually is. Yeah.
And Caroline, it's also interesting to hear more about your experiences coming from IKEA and now working at a company like Oatly that's transparently honest, and IKEA of course also pushing the agenda. But how do you see the difference in your everyday work?
Oh, that's an interesting one. I think that there's many differences. I think sustainability is really at the core of both companies, but from a very different perspective. I think the differences coming to Oatly are that we are really up against an incumbent industry, which is a really interesting challenge. But we are smaller and more agile. And thirdly, I mean, everything, I think the fact that we have our entire business model delivers to a sustainability impact is the biggest, of course, difference. Yeah, I could go on. Let me stop with that because there's probably a lot of questions.
Fair enough. Coming from a sustainability manager perspective and trying to engage the whole value chain with stakeholders and so on, we can start with Caroline. Like, how do you collaborate with other stakeholders, such as suppliers, customers, or even competitors, to drive sustainability forward? Yeah. And it's also very relevant for you, Lisa, afterwards.
I think one thing that Oatly has done exceptionally well is actually formed plant-based alliances where we come together with, I mean, you could say competitors, but we could also say our friends in driving a plant-based revolution, where we've been able to, join forces, create a common voice, especially when it comes to regulation and policy. And like I said, we're up against a massive incumbent industry that isn't really, that quiet about us taking a lot of market share. And so actually joining forces with like-minded partners there has been very helpful. For example, where we actually squashed the Amendment 171, which was this European legislation where, we couldn't use words such as creamy because consumers would be too confused and think that's dairy and it's not. And obviously that was ridiculous. And we came together with like-minded companies to raise the awareness. And we're doing similar things around, for example, having CO2 labeling, which we think is exceptionally important. And that's not even just with plant-based companies, but also with the foods industry as a totality and other food industry players that also see the benefits of driving that change. So, yeah.
And Lisa?
Yeah, no, I fully agree with what Caroline said. But to add a few more things, I mean, engaging the value chain, I mean, one thing, and of course, and that's probably maybe not the most exciting, but to really set clear expectations towards your suppliers. And we have done so with some of the bigger ones, the ones that we really, where we have a very big spend, because we know that will also have the biggest impact. So we're starting with those. But then, what is, of course, more exciting is like when you really start, working together with across your value chain on very specific projects, such as our blade recycling project that I had a chance to really speak into detail about. But that's a really good example of where we have, together with some with academia, have found a technical solution on how to efficiently disassemble wind turbine blades, so we get access to the different materials, and thereby they can enter into their own recycling value chain. So exactly what has been the problem forever in the industry, we have actually now found a solution to solve. But of course, we are wind turbine manufacturers. We are not a waste handler, and we have no ambition of being that either. So then we reached out to someone or to different waste handlers and started to have a dialogue with them and on who could be a good partner for us. And we ended up with Stena Recycling, a primarily Nordic-based recycling company, where they would then actually do the actual recycling of the blades with the technology that we have found with other partners, and then also kind of bringing in one of our epoxy resin suppliers, which is the glue that is holding the blades together, So when the blades have gone through the recycling process of Stena, then the epoxy powder will be sent back to that epoxy resin supplier Oatly, and recover that, so we can actually use recycled epoxy resin when we produce new blades. So really creating like a full circular loop for wind turbine blades materials, and that's like, you know, finding good partners that can help you putting things into life and also make it scalable. Yeah.
I think it's also interesting kind of from the perspective of this webinar, because the market and the push for that sustainability innovation to happen has been kind of self-created in a sense, with Vestas and the other big wind turbine OEMs coming forth and saying, hey, this is a problem. We're all aware of it. We need to change it. There has been, you know, public calls for a ban on landfilling wind turbine blades. So as that the problem in the entire industry, there was a big awareness, and essentially there was a market created for sustainability innovation, which of course now Vestas can draw a lot of strategic value from. So it's one of my favorite go-to examples, really, when it comes to integrating sustainability to the core of business.
Thank you, guys. There's a very good question here from the audience, and it goes on like this. Usually, reporting-based sustainability efforts are easy for organizations to engage with, perhaps because they're required and tangible. What challenges do you see for moving to an approach where sustainability is, or like moving towards an approach where sustainability is truly a part of the strategy and operation? And how could these challenges be overcome? So imagine that the wind industry didn't look at the wind blades as an issue yet. We don't look at sustainability. We're inherently sustainable. That was something that they thought some years ago. Caroline, you're not sitting in a position where you're actually driving that. And you want to do this in an organization. So how would you do that? And what challenges do you see?
So, I mean, I would reflect that I think awareness is always step one. So, I mean, I think first it's to understand and create that awareness throughout the company with key stakeholders. But I also think reporting can also be the means to start that discussion, because you can also dissect reporting to actually come out with so much interesting insights to actually to steer your company to engage and embed sustainability more into strategy. So, I mean, with your example, you're saying it's something that wasn't even kind of known about. But I would also like to say that I think that there is a big possibility to drive strategy and drive action through companies by actually start with the starting point of using that reporting, which is regulation, but you can use it as an entry point to create that awareness and understanding and insights to then take action.
Yeah, I think that's right. And also what we see a lot of our clients face right now, probably a lot of people on this call are very, very busy trying to prepare for CSRD and ESRS right now. So full flood of new reporting requirements. And of course, that is a lot of time and a lot of resources spent into it. And I've heard a lot of CFOs also say now, hey, like, we need to make sure we get something out of it. Like, we spend a great deal of time and effort now perfecting this bureaucratic task. So what are we getting for it? So in a way, it's almost like, I don't know if intended or unintended, but an unforeseen driver by forcing companies to spend a lot of time preparing for these regulations that you then really have to think about, why do you do it? What value do you extract from that?
But I agree. I think I agree, Felix. I think there is what is the approach we have taken with the CSRD as an example is to, and we have just now finalized our double materiality assessment, and to really focus on, you know, the biggest material risk and also, you know, what also really brings value to you as a company. So you could spend an army of people, you can spend a lot of money on this, but and we are spending a lot on this, and so is others, but it's also about taking a pragmatic approach and focus on what really delivers value. Yeah.
Sorry guys, sadly the time's up, but I'd like to thank today's speakers, Lisa and Caroline and Felix, on the insights. Lisa, it was very interesting to hear about the concrete projects that Vestas is pursuing at the moment to reach your targets and your work across the value chain. Thank you very much for that. And Caroline, very interesting to hear your vision of converting half of all dairy consumption and your perspective that your core business is actually sustainability and for this sped up version of it in the end. Thank you. I hope that this session for the audience provided valuable insights. And as stated earlier, the webinar will be shared on YouTube and we will share whatever materials that will be shareable. Thanks for participating and posing interesting questions to the speakers. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.